So you can't see the screen.
No, ma'am, the screen is still not visible.
Okay, so now what do? I've started sharing the screen. Is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So, one second. So actually this class should not have been virtual because I wanted to show you instruments and all, and these are important from your exam point of view. And I can see only 44 people here. Why are the others not attending? I mean, they're going to miss it. They'll not be able to identify these on their exam. And I'll just show you a PPT first, and just to show you the images, and then I'll attempt to switch on the video, and if that is possible, and show you the other things also. If possible, on GoToWebinar only, or maybe we can create another ID if that is not possible. So I'm starting. Any questions you have, you can type in the chat box and we'll take those in the end. And meanwhile, I want this session to be sort of interactive because this is from whatever you've already studied. So I'm not going to teach you the details. I will just tell you what are the type of questions that will be asked when these things are shown to you. This will be a part of your main Viva examination during finals, and the usual questions which will be asked. I'll just tell you about those, and you will have to uh, study about them yourself. So it is basically from whatever you're studying for all of the other things. So we'll begin. Okay. So first, this is the bone marrow aspiration needle. Okay. So who's going to tell me what are the indications of bone marrow aspiration? Akhil. Akhil Jindal is there. So can you tell me why we do bone marrow aspiration? Any one indication of bone marrow aspiration? So for all these instruments, you must know how to identify them. And I have unmuted all of you. So whenever I ask a question, you can unmute yourself at your end. From my end, I have unmuted all of you. So anyone can tell me what are the indications of bone marrow aspiration? Akhil? Akhil, am I audible to you? Yeah, somebody has written leukemia, aplastic anemia. Varsha has written aplastic anemia and leukemia. Yes. Okay. Anything else? So first thing is to identify this needle. So this most of these needles have a hollow part. This is the hollow part, and inside that there is the stellate, which is the solid needle. Hello. Anji. 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 So this is the guard. This guard is basically meant for fixing the length of the needle according to what you estimate to be the depth of the depth you want to insert inside the bone. So this screw is opened, and this is fixed at a desired length. So depending upon what is the size of the baby and how much muscle mass he has, we just adjust this length according to that, so we don't accidentally go too deep inside. So you hold the needle with a, I'll just show it to you once we switch on the video. So this is the stellate, this is the hollow needle, and this is the steel thing, this is the guard. You should know the parts of the needle also. And these are the sites. The usual questions would be, what are the sites where you can do bone marrow aspiration? So these are the three sites. One is this tibia, the posterior iliac crest, the iliac crest. So in the tibia, you do it in the anteromedial aspect of the upper part of the tibia, and this is the part where you usually puncture, and we use it in infants. And for older children, we usually use the iliac crest. Then another site is the sternum. We use the sternum mostly in adults, not in children, because in children the bone is thin and there are chances of puncturing through and through. So the two favored sites for children are tibia and the iliac crest. So this is the picture which shows where you usually puncture. And what are the indications for doing bone marrow aspiration? So it can be done for, as you people said, acute leukemia. Whenever you are suspecting leukemia, you can do it for confirmation. And other indications would be for chronic infections. For example, you suspect malaria, but you're not getting a clue on the investigations done on peripheral blood, then you may go in for bone marrow. For Kala Azar also, you can do bone marrow aspiration, and that aspirate can be sent for microscopic examination as well as for culture in an medium. Then whenever you suspect storage disorders like Gaucher's and Niemann-Pick's disease. Anemia, whenever it is unexplained, the first investigation for anemia would be, so what is the first investigation for anemia? To determine the cause of anemia. Okay, we do a complete hemogram with peripheral blood film. And despite all the other investigations, if no clue is obtained, so that is called as unexplained anemia, we can do this bone marrow aspiration. Even for iron deficiency anemia, we might do for knowing the iron stores in the bone marrow. Then for thrombocytopenia, unexplained thrombocytopenia or thrombocytosis, for ITP, thrombocytopenia is seen in idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. So before giving steroids, we may resort to bone marrow to rule out malignancy and other causes. Then patient presents with pancytopenia. Again, bone marrow aspiration may be required to determine the cause, to see whether what is the cellularity, whether enough cells are being produced or there is a deficiency at the level of production also. So for leukopenia of any cause, for malignancies, to see for infiltration in the marrow. So lymphoma, if it is involves the marrow also, it becomes stage 4. So for that also we have to do bone marrow aspiration. And any pyrexia of unknown origin. So for if all other investigations are not helping, we may resort to marrow to determine the cause. Then the causes of failure of aspiration. So for bone marrow aspiration, when you fix the needle inside and you pulled out the stellate, you attach a syringe to the needle and you aspirate. And sometimes you may not get anything, which is called as failure of aspiration. The reasons for that can be, if your technique is improper, you have not gone into the marrow, your needle is stuck somewhere in the bone. Other causes can be if the needle is blocked by something. It could be skin, a piece of bone, or subcutaneous tissue. Then you may have to push a little saline, or just push a little saline and then aspirate again. So if your needle is blocked, then other reasons can be osteopetrosis. So osteopetrosis is also called as marble bone disease. So bones are very hard, and it is difficult to do a marrow examination in these. So this myeloid metaplasia or myelofibrosis, when the bone marrow is replaced by fibrous tissue. Then even in leukemia, sometimes you may need to do a marrow examination for densely packed marrow of acute leukemia. You may not be able to get this thing aspirate when the marrow is densely packed, because it is so densely packed with cells. You are fail to aspirate anything. Then what are the complications which can occur because of bone marrow aspiration? Usually it is a safe procedure. Complications are minor. They can be excessive bleeding. So for that you have to just apply pressure for a longer time. Then infection, usually when there is you have not used proper sterile method to do the bone marrow, or if there is a lesion overlying that site, usually in that condition marrow is contraindicated from that site. We use an alternate site, but you may accidentally introduce infection into the marrow. Then long lasting discomfort at the biopsy site. Sometimes there may be pain, and for sternum, penetration of the breastbone may be there, but we usually do not use sternum for pediatric marrow examinations. and complications may be related to sedation. So for young children, we usually have to sedate them for any invasive procedure, and that complications of sedation may be there. So for the bone marrow aspiration, we just get the blood aspirated from the marrow. This is now bone marrow biopsy. So when you need to see the cells in proportion to each other, we do a bone marrow biopsy. So the needle is slightly different. It is longer than the bone marrow aspiration needle, and otherwise it has the same outer hollow covering, and inside there is a solid stellate. And indications for biopsy would be the same. Usually we do both the procedures in the same sitting. So initially we get a report, bone marrow aspiration report is available in a couple of days only. For bone marrow biopsy, a longer time is taken. So the indications would be same: myelosclerosis, malignancy, lymphoma, aplastic anemia, and disseminated granulomas, metastatic carcinomas. So all these. In this, there is a removal of the segment of the bone cortex also along with the intact marrow. Advantages of bone marrow biopsy are the cells can be studied in true proportion to each other, and it avoids mixing of the peripheral cells, and the cells are not distorted in bone marrow biopsy. Disadvantages, again, the report comes late. Then we have the intraosseous needle. So it is again for bone marrow aspiration, and intraosseous needle is basically to obtain access. Whenever IV access is not available, for example, patient is in shock or patient is dehydrated, veins are collapsed, and you urgently need to administer fluid and drugs. In that situation, you will use an intraosseous needle. So it is slightly different. You can use a usual bone marrow aspiration needle also for intraosseous procedures, but we have a separate intraosseous needle, and this is again used in the same sites. So for aspiration, biopsy, and for this use of intraosseous needle, the sites are all the same, the procedure is the same, only the indication is different. For this intraosseous needle, it is used to administer intravenous drugs and IV fluids in patients in whom IV access immediately is not possible. So a patient comes in shock, is severely dehydrated, you initially insert an intraosseous needle, administer fluids. Usually it is used in the anterior medial aspect of the tibia, and once you have corrected the shock and all, and the patient is somewhat settled, you can attempt IV access again. So usually it is not used for more than 8 hours at a stretch, and all drugs which are given IV can also be given through this intraosseous needle. So is that clear? Any questions so far? Okay, so the next is lumbar puncture needle. So who is going to tell me what are the indications for lumbar puncture? Varnika. Varnika, what are the indications for a lumbar puncture? Can you hear me? Varnika Aditi
Yes.
Singh. I want.
Yes.
Yeah. So what are the indications for this LP?
Ma'am, in suspected meningitis.
Very good. Anything else? So we will do a diagnostic lumbar puncture in suspected meningitis. Any other indications you all can think of? Vijay Goswami. Hanji Vijay, can you hear me? हाँ बताओ.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other indications you can think of?
No, ma'am.
So identification of the needle is important. This is a very long needle. The basic mechanism is the same. There is an inside there is a metal needle which is solid, and outside there is a plastic sheath which is hollow, and you use it for certain diagnostic procedures. Like she mentioned, whenever you suspect meningitis, you take CSF for analysis and subject it to microscopy and biochemical analysis to see for features of meningitis. So what are the features of meningitis? Hanji Yugam, what would be the features of meningitis on CSF analysis? Say pyomeningitis.
Ma'am, the CSF pressure would be high.
Very good. So the first thing would be when you put in the needle, you will see that the CSF comes with increased pressure. Anything else on analysis?
On visual, it could be turbid looking.
Yes, it could be turbid. And on examination, on microscopy,
Protein count could be high. There could be cells could be high.
yeah, so on microscopy, the cell count may be high, depending upon whether we are suspecting pyogenic meningitis or it turns out to be tubercular meningitis or anything else. So there would be raised proportion of neutrophils or lymphocytes depending upon the etiology. So the cell count may be high, and on biochemistry, the proteins may be high, and the sugar may be reduced depending upon what type of meningitis it is. In pyomeningitis, the sugar might be as low as 0. So it could be approaching 0, very low sugars in pyomeningitis. In tubercular, they might be slightly low. In viral, in most of them, there may not be any effect on sugar. In a few etiologies, they may be slightly reduced sugar content. So this is for a diagnostic use. Anybody can tell me a therapeutic use of this thing, a lumbar puncture, twinkle? Twinkle, is she here? No. Twinkle Sharma, Twinkle Sardana. None of you are here. Tulika. Tulika, can you tell me what any therapeutic indication of a lumbar puncture? Yes, Twinkle Sharma ने लिखा है. आवाज क्या unmute नहीं कर पा रहे क्या? So she's written methotrexate in leukemia. Very good. So we can use it to administer drugs. So the most common indication is for spinal anesthesia. It is used for surgeries on the lower limb and lower abdomen. So we administer local anesthetic agent. Then it is also used for administering drugs. For example, it is used in methotrexate can be administered in leukemia. And certain dyes can also be introduced for myelography. Usually the procedure is now outdated, but it used to be done earlier. And for hydrocephalus, yeah, okay. So therapeutic tap may be done sometimes to relieve the pressure. Again, not done as frequently, but it will decrease pressure. Okay, very good. So this is the needle hub, and you where you do a lumbar puncture between the L4 and the spine of the L4 and the L5 vertebra usually, and you make the patient lie in the lateral position, and you feel for the iliac crest and go downwards towards the L4 and the L5 spinous processes, and between them you insert the needle directly pointing towards the umbilicus, and you feel you get a feeling of give way when the needle has entered the space from where the CSF is drained, and you can see the fluid coming into this needle hub. And when you withdraw this orange, the inside part, the CSF will start trickling. And indications, as you've already told me, infections, bleeding like subarachnoid hemorrhage, then malignant cells. For malignant cells like leukemia, acute leukemia, you do a CSF examination at the beginning of treatment to prognosticate the disease, to stage the disease. Then for LGBS, you do a CCL, that is Landry's Guillain-Barré paralysis. You do CSF examination to see for albuminocytological dissociation. So the protein levels are raised while the cells are not present. So that is called as albuminocytological dissociation in LGBS. Then isolated increased gamma globulins may be seen in multiple sclerosis. So this is again an indication for diagnostic CSF. Then we measure the CSF pressure to inject spinal anesthetic and chemotherapeutic drugs, and to inject dye, for example, to do myelography. Complications. Complications of CSF could be a failed puncture. It could be a traumatic puncture when accidentally you puncture a vessel and the CSF becomes pink or red, and you might have to repeat it after 24-48 hours. Then you may introduce infection if you have not used strict asepsis, and post-spinal headache is one complication of CSF examination. Discomfort in the back. Many children complain of back pain for a few days following LP, and bleeding may occur. Usually that is uncommon. And brainstem herniation may occur if you have done a lumbar puncture in a patient with raised intracranial pressure, especially a patient having intracranial space occupying lesion. So one of the precautions of doing CSF examination is you first do a fundus examination to rule out raised ICP, rule out papilledema. And sometimes it is also recommended to do a CT scan to rule out an intracranial space occupying lesion and raised sign features of raised ICP to before doing a lumbar puncture. Contraindications can be again raised ICP is a contraindication in which it can lead to a complication of brainstem herniation. Then an infection overlying the puncture site, that would be a contraindication. Any bleeding disorder, a platelet count less than say 50,000. Earlier it was less than 20,000. So thrombocytopenia or bleeding, any other bleeding disorder would be a relative contraindication for doing a lumbar puncture, and a sick general condition of the patient is also a relative contraindication. Now coming to the TrueCut biopsy gun. So this biopsy gun is used for doing biopsies from intra-abdominal locations. So we can use it for a liver biopsy or a kidney biopsy. So this is a Bard's gun, and it has got again a needle inside, and this needle has an area for taking the biopsy. So you just withdraw these two levers back. This lever is also pulled back, and then you choose the site from where you want to take biopsy, and usually done maybe done under ultrasonic guidance also. And you press this button, the needle will go inside and it will immediately take a piece and it will go back into the sheath. So there is this inside needle which is covered by a sheath. So the needle will go into the tissue and come back into the sheath. I will show you when I turn on the video. So this is a TrueCut biopsy gun. You should know how to identify it and what are the indications for a liver biopsy or a kidney biopsy. Then this is an AMBU bag. So this AMBU stands for Artificial Manual Breathing Unit. Artificial Manual Breathing Unit. So this is an important device, and most of you will be asked questions on this. This one which I have displayed here is a self-inflating AMBU bag, and self-inflating because it is made of a material. When you press this, it has some recoil. When you leave it, it will get inflated itself. This is in contrast to some flow inflating bags which are used by anesthesia people in the operation theaters. So this is the structure of the AMBU bag. So this is very important. You must listen carefully to this. So this is the bag which the surface of the bag is textured. It is not smooth, so that it does not slip from your hands. So there is a good grip. This is the patient end of the bag. In this patient end, there are two valves. This is the pop-off valve. Whenever you press, you are actually not measuring anything, how much pressure you're using, you're not measuring. So there is always a risk of pneumothorax if you put more pressure. So this pop-off valve will sense increased pressure and it will get elevated to relieve that extra pressure so that pneumothorax does not happen. So this is a pop-off valve. So here, this is the patient end. This end is fixed either onto this mask or it is fixed onto the endotracheal tube. Inside this area, there is a one-way valve. So this one-way valve ensures that when you press this, the air goes inside, but when you release this, the air does not go back inside into the bag. The exhaled air does not go back inside into the bag. Now, this at the other end, this is the patient end, and this is the other end, where you attach the oxygen. So here you will see two ports. One is a very narrow port to which you attach the oxygen tubing. So this oxygen tubing is attached to the oxygen cylinder or to the wall source of oxygen. And this on the broad end, it is attached to the oxygen reservoir. So what happens if you leave this end open? What will happen? You press the bag. There is a valve here also, a one-way valve. So when you press the bag, this valve will ensure that the air does not move backwards. So the air inside the bag will move forwards into the patient through this valve. When you release this bag, the air oxygen, if you've attached oxygen here, the oxygen will rush in to fill the space inside, and air from this port will also rush in to fill the space inside. So if you are giving 100% oxygen from here, it will get diluted with air coming from here. And that would the mixture the concentration of the oxygen which is actually being delivered to the patient would be somewhere in between 21% in air and 100% which you are providing from here. So if you want to raise the oxygen concentration, you attach a reservoir here. So reservoir is basically an empty balloon or a corrugated tube. So what will happen is whenever you are pressing from here, mean this oxygen is constantly flowing. So whenever you are pressing, instead of going inside, this will fill the reservoir. So during again expansion, oxygen from both of these will fill this reservoir. So you will be able to administer close to 90%. I hope that is clear. Any doubts here? So you just remember the parts. This is an ambu bag. This is the self-inflating bag region. This is the patient area. This is the pop-off valve. This is the one-way valve which is attached to the mask or to the endotracheal tube. The surface is textured for a good grip. This is the broad port which is attached to the oxygen reservoir, and this is the narrow port which is attached to the oxygen source. Okay. So these are the two kinds of reservoirs. We have this balloon shaped reservoir and we have this corrugated tube. So this corrugation, it is corrugated to increase the surface area. So either of them can be used. Now these are the different face masks. They have a cushioned part and these are used for resuscitation. Okay, so what is the ambu bag used for? Who's going to tell me now? Inayat. नहीं इनायत पता नहीं है कि नहीं. Isha. Isha Garg. Isha, can you tell me what are the indications of using an ambu bag?
Yes, ma'am.
What is
Hello.
where do you use an ambu bag?
Ma'am, resuscitation.
हाँ. बताओ. अच्छा ईशा. तो ambu bag तो बहुत जरूरी है बेटा. है ना everybody should know. Okay, Karan. Karan, what is the indication of using an ambu bag? Ishan. Ishan.
Yes, ma'am.
सुन नहीं रहा क्या किसी को? तो ये लोग है ही नहीं क्या? अच्छा, if anybody knows, type it in the chat box. किसी को भी नहीं आता क्या? Oh, audio quality. Please close any unused internet content. So maybe there are internet issues. Yes, okay. Somebody has written resuscitation. Very good. Respiratory distress. Okay. And heart rate less than 60. CPR, artificial respiration, respiratory failure, meconium aspiration. So, okay. So basically the indications for using an ambu bag would be whenever you want to give artificial respirations, which could be when there is cardiac arrest and you will give breath artificially. Whenever there is respiratory failure, you need to manually ventilate before putting the patient on the ventilator. While the ventilator is being prepared, you may need to manually ventilate. And yes, CPR. For CPR, we can use it. Okay, so This is the face mask which is attached to the ambu bag. The upper end of the face mask, it is kept at the bridge of the nose, and the lower part is kept over the chin. So it makes an airtight seal over the face of the child, so that whatever air you push in goes directly into the lungs. So sometimes we use an endotracheal tube. So this is an endotracheal tube. There are basically two types of endotracheal tubes which are used in children, and this one which I'm showed here is a cuffed endotracheal tube, in contrast to this one which is uncuffed. So you can see the difference between these. This one does not have any appendage to it. This is just simple tube which has markings, and it has a connector here, and it has a black portion here. So this is the tube which we usually use in children less than 8 years of age, and this black part is called as the vocal cord guide, and this tube is curved structure. It has a bevel which usually faces towards the left, and this one is the cuffed endotracheal tube, usually used in children beyond 8 years of age. We don't use the cuffed one in younger children because because of the narrow trachea, there is a risk of mucosal damage which may heal with fibrosis, leading to stricture formation. And however, this cuff causes a better prevents air leak, and there are several other reasons why a cuffed tube may be preferred in many cases, because once you put in the tube, you will use this part to inflate this cuff. So this balloon will get inflated, and it will prevent leak of the air from lungs. So whenever the compliance of the lungs is reduced, for example in pneumonia, ARDS, etc., so it would be easier to ventilate by using a cuffed tube, and plus it will also prevent the aspiration of the secretions. So this is the vocal cord here, in a vocal cord guide here, and the size of the endotracheal tube which we usually use is age of the child in years divided by 4, and you add this entire thing to 4. So for example, that is age over 4 plus 4. This is the usually because in children we will have to use according to their age. So age upon 4 plus 4. So if it is a 2-year-old child, so it would be 2 upon 4, that is half, and added to 4, so we use a 4.5 number tube. We usually keep a tube which is one size smaller and one size larger. We keep it ready because during intubation we may see certain variations which may require a larger or a smaller tube. And the length which we usually insert inside is 3 times the internal diameter, which I told you earlier was the diameter of the tube, and then we have to see the length also. So the length will be from the level of the teeth downwards. So that length is 3 times the diameter. And this vocal cord guide is usually placed at the level of the vocal cords, and when a tube is properly inside in an adult, it would be around 4 centimeters above the level of the carina. So in a child, that level would vary, but it has to be a few centimeters above the carina, so that both of the lungs are effectively ventilated. So this endotracheal tube usually has another hole on one of its on side, which is called as the Murphy's hole, and which is there to ventilate to provide some at least patency if the this end of the tube gets blocked. Maybe it is impacting upon it is fixed onto the carina, so there would be obstruction of this end. So this Murphy's eye is open so that at least one lung is getting ventilated. So why do you need an endotracheal tube? You already have a easier thing which is called as this mask. So anybody can tell me why endotracheal tube might be required? हाँ जी, तो मुझे कौन बताएगा? कुशाग्र, कुशाग्र, can you tell me why endotracheal tube is required when we can effectively use a mask? Why would we need to use an endotracheal tube? Am I audible? Can you just type in the chat box? I mean, nobody is okay. To maintain the name, you people are having difficulty with the audio. Is there some problem with the audio? So why are you people not talking? कोई एक जना अनम्यूट करके मुझे बताओ भाई कि बात क्यों नहीं कर रहे हैं, मतलब इज देयर सम प्रॉब्लम विद द ऑडियो? ये तो आंसर तो सबने लिखा है बट कोई बोल नहीं रहा है. So to prevent aspiration, neonatal resuscitation, to mitigate patency, ambu bag has to be manually performed. बेटा मैनुअल तो एंडोटेकियल ट्यूब भी है ना, मतलब वो तो सिर्फ एयरवे मेंटेन करने के लिए है, मास्क और ट्यूब. ओके, टू प्रोवाइड पॉजिटिव प्रेशर हम मास्क से भी दे सकते हैं. In congenital diaphragmatic hernia. Okay, so congenital diaphragmatic hernia is a contraindication for bag and mask ventilation. So there he means we are using an endotracheal tube. Okay, ET can be connected to ventilator. Very good. ET can be connected to ventilator. Okay. So the reason why we use endotracheal tube is to have a definitive airway, to place a definitive airway. So for example, you're resuscitating a patient of cardiac arrest. In the initial phases, you will use an ambu because ambu and a mask because you don't want to waste time. You want to give immediate positive pressure ventilation to revive the child. Now, once the child is revived and you feel that the child needs prolonged ventilation, you will need to place a definitive airway. So for that, you use an endotracheal tube. In some cases, you don't need to ventilate, but still you need to have a patent airway. For example, in unconscious child. In an unconscious child, the tongue may fall backwards or there may be secretions, etc., which the child may aspirate. In those cases, you will prophylactically insert an endotracheal tube to get a patent airway. So, in an unconscious child who is having good respiratory effort, you may not need to manually ventilate the child, but still you will put in an endotracheal tube to maintain an airway. Okay? So, the basic, and for obviously for doing attaching the child to a mechanical ventilator, you cannot attach the ventilator to the this thing mask. So for that also you will need to place an endotracheal tube. So okay, now this is oral airway. So this is you can see they come in different colors and different sizes. So basically the function of the oral airway is to maintain airway patency. So as I told you, in an unconscious child, there is a tendency for the tongue to fall back and block this pharyngeal opening. So, so that that does not happen, we put in an oral airway. So this is a curved plastic sort of thing which has a bore in the center, and the size of this airway will vary upon the size of the child. So you take the distance from the angle of the mandible to the midpoint of the incisors. So this is the size which you take, and this is how you choose. So you have a number of oral airways present. You pick up, you just put them on the side of the face, and you measure the distance from the midpoint of the incisors to the angle of the mandible, and you take the size which suits the best. And there are two techniques of putting an oral airway. This is a very simple device to maintain airway patency in an unconscious child, and one is you just put it along the shape of the palate. So this way, which is shown in the upper picture, you can see the curvature of the oral airway is parallel to the curvature of the palate. So you just put it inside like this. Another method of putting it in is the other way. You put with this curvature facing upward, the concavity facing upwards, and the moment you go inside, you rotate it to put this along the palate. So these are the two methods of placing an oral airway, and indication I've already told you to maintain airway patency. So when you study resuscitation and whenever your sick child presents to you, the first things which you ensure are airway, breathing, and circulation. So this is the first part, that is the airway. So we ensure airway. We listen to the patient to hear for any secretions. We see if the tongue is falling back, and all that will ensure that if we feel that the tongue is falling back and the child will not be able to maintain airway spontaneously, then we can use these devices. Then coming to an intravenous cannula, this you must have seen. This one is a pediatric IV cannula. Again, this has a metal inner this thing stellate, which is again hollow. In this case, this one is also hollow, and there is a plastic sheath on top of it, which this is the butterfly sort of these attachments here, and this is the cap which is attached to the hub. So whenever you put it into you puncture the skin and it enters the vein, there would be blood, a dot of blood which appears here. And once you see that, you can withdraw the inner metal stellate and push in the plastic cannula inside and fix it there. So it is used for giving intravenous fluids and IV drugs. Okay. Then we have this drip set. This is the normal routine drip set, and what are the indications of using this device? Okay, who's going to tell me what are the indications of using this? Ritika. Ritika Gupta.
Yes, ma'am.
हाँ, ये pediatric ये drip set कहाँ पे use करते हैं?
Ma'am, I don't know.
Not a difficult question, बच्चे drip set है किसके लिए use करते होंगे? To administer IV fluids. ठीक है, वो आपने सबसे पहले कैनुला लगाया, अब कैनुला के साथ क्या देते हो आप? IV कैनुला पढ़ाया ना मैंने आपको, उससे what do you administer through a IV कैनुला? इससे क्या देते हैं? फ्लूइड्स एंड ड्रग्स. तो ये फ्लूइड्स कहाँ से देंगे? एक बॉटल लगाएंगे फ्लूइड की, बॉटल को कैनुला के साथ कनेक्ट करने के लिए हम ये ड्रिप सेट यूज करेंगे. ठीक है. So these are the parts of the drip set. This is a transparent chamber from which you can see the drops of whatever drug or fluid you are administering. The drops will fall down, and you can count the drops and you can adjust the rate of the infusion with the help of this flow regulator. So this is a flow regulator, and this is a part which is capped. It is used to puncture the bottle. So normal saline या जो भी fluid आप दे रहे हो उसकी bottle को puncture करने के लिए आप ये cap उतारोगे और ये sharp पोर्ट है जिससे आप पंक्चर करोगे और वो फ्लूइड के साथ फ्लूइड ड्रिप स्टैंड पे हैंग करके ये वाला एंड है ये पेशेंट की आईवी कैनुला पे फिक्स कर दो. ठीक है, यहाँ से आप ड्रॉप्स देखते रहोगे कि आ रहे हैं, रुका नहीं है, एंड यहाँ से आप ड्रॉप्स काउंट भी कर सकते हो. Then there is this injection port which is used to give intravenous drugs ताकि आपको यहाँ से बार बार डिटैच नहीं करना पड़े. तो पेशेंट को अगर कंटिन्यूसली आईवी फ्लूइड्स जा रहे हैं और बीच बीच में आपको इंजेक्टेबल्स देने हैं, मे बी एंटीबायोटिक्स और समथिंग, then you will use this injection port for administering those drugs. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Then, okay, so coming to the this thing, pediatric drip set. So वो drip set को सब में use कर सकते थे, पिछला वाला जो दिखाया था. Now this one is called as the pediatric drip set. Okay, so basically in children the fluid is administered according to their body weight, body size. And in younger children, that amount of fluid which may be required by them is sometimes very less, and that one bottle of fluid which is usually available in the market is say 500 ml. So you don't want to risk attaching that bottle so that sometimes the parents may regulate the flow themselves. उनको लगे कि बहुत धीरे चल रहा है, उन्होंने फास्ट कर दिया तो पूरी बॉटल अंदर चली जाएगी. So to avoid that, we use a pediatric drip set. So this is usually 100 ml, 110, 150 ml maximum size होता है इसका. तो इसमें भी वही पोर्ट है, ये वाला पोर्ट आईवी कैनुला में लगा देते हैं. तो इसमें 100 ml हम फ्लूइड फिल कर देते हैं और इसमें ये ट्रांसपेरेंट चेम्बर है जहाँ से ड्रॉप्स गिरते हैं. सो यहाँ इसका जो ड्रॉप साइज है दैट इज स्मॉलर, 1/4 द साइज ऑफ द ड्रॉप्स विच इज देयर इन द अदर ड्रिप सेट. सो अगर उसका 1 ड्रॉप पर मिनट जा रहा है तो इसका 4 ड्रॉप्स पर मिनट जाएगा, बिकॉज इट ब्रेक्स, दिस पीडियाट्रिक ड्रिप सेट ब्रेक्स 1 ड्रॉप इनटू 4 माइक्रो ड्रॉप्स. इट्स आल्सो कॉल्ड एज अ माइक्रो ड्रिप सेट. एंड इसमें यही फ्लो रेगुलेटर है और इसके जो ये फ्लूइड वाला चेम्बर है इसके ऊपर से जो पाइप आती है उसमें ये पोर्ट है, ये पोर्ट से हम उसको पंक्चर करेंगे नॉर्मल सलाइन या आरएल या आईवी फ्लूइड की बोतल को. और दिस इज अ क्लैंप. जब हम एडिक्वेट अमाउंट इसमें फिल कर देंगे तो हम इसको बंद कर देंगे यहाँ से. दिस इज द क्लैंप. ठीक है. So this thing with the big chamber is a pediatric drip set. और इस पे लिखा भी होता है. Whenever you get these devices in examination, don't just get confused कि ये तो मैंने देखा नहीं है, ये मुझे बताया नहीं है, because these things come under, may slightly vary depending upon whatever company is manufacturing them. So mostly it is written on them what they are used for. So next is a blood transfusion set. So it is basically similar to a pediatric drip set, but it has this mesh sort of thing here, which is called as the blood filter. So this is basically for filtering out whatever solid components or clots, etc. may be there in the blood you are giving to the patient. So this is specifically used for transfusing blood. Then this is a mucus trap. So mucus trap, this is a small bottle, 10-20 ml, and it has got two this tubes coming out of this. One tube is shorter, the other one is longer. This is called as a mucus trap, basically used for sucking out secretions from the airways, and we use it for bronchoscopy also to take samples. So while doing a bronchoscopy, we add fluid into the tracheobronchial tree, and we aspirate it, and we attach this thing to the suction. So when the negative pressure is there inside, the fluid will get sucked into this vial and it will get collected here. And since the other tube is at a raised level, this will not be able to go into the suction chamber. So we can send this fluid for analysis. So this is called as a mucus trap for sucking out secretions and can be sent for analysis. Okay? So it can be used in bronchoscopy to collect bronchoalveolar lavage. And then these are nasal prongs. This is an oxygen delivery device. They come in different sizes, can be infant, pediatric, or adult. And these two ports, which are used to deliver oxygen, are placed into the nostril depending upon the size of the child. And this covers the face of the child and fixed behind the ears. This will adjust the tightness of this around the head of the child, and we use it to administer oxygen for children with respiratory distress. So this is an infant who is on whom we are using these nasal prongs. So these prongs, the two ports are into the child's nostril, and this part rests here, and this will go behind the head, and we will fix the size and attach the other end. This end is attached to the supply of oxygen. So the flow of oxygen which can be administered through this will depend upon the size. For an infant and a pediatric one, usually it is up to 1 to 8 liters per minute. But for an adult, we may be able to administer as high as 20 liters per minute. So then this is a suction catheter. So there are two types of catheters which we will see lying there on the table for your exam. One is the suction catheter and one is the infant feeding tube. They look mostly similar, but there are subtle differences. Suction catheter, the main purpose is sucking out secretion. So patient who is having a lot of oral secretions, or a patient on ventilator in which you have to do endotracheal suctioning, you use a suction catheter. The suction catheter has this port, the distal end, it is open. Okay, so there is a hole here for sucking. Thus there are eyes, an eye just near to the distal end. On the other hand, the Ryle's tube, this is the feeding tube. This has the distal part is blind, so it is not open, it is closed, and there are eyes on the side. So basically, this is for giving a feed. So this is we want to avoid injury to the mucosa. So this part we have closed, and we just administer feed through this end with a syringe, and it goes out through these holes on the side. And usually infant feed, all these tubes which I've shown you, the endotracheal tube, the Ryle's tube, the suction catheter, etc., they are all radiolucent. So you can, if they are inside the body, you cannot see them unless they have this green line. So this green line is a radio opaque line. So when this tube is inside the body and you take an X-ray, you will be able to judge the position of the tube with the help of this green line. Same for endotracheal tube also. There is a green radio opaque line by which you can judge where the tube is inside the trachea, and you can adjust its position depending upon that. So feeding tube and suction catheter. You can see suction catheter is We usually do not keep it inside, so it does usually lacks a green line, but sometimes it may have one. And it has an open distal end, and this one has a closed distal end. Okay. Then coming to this is a urine collecting bag. Just connect the charger. Okay, so this is a urine collecting bag, also called as the Euro bag. Now who's going to tell me indications of using a Euro bag? Tanisha. Tanisha Gupta. Hanji Tanisha, where do you think we use a Euro bag?
Hello,
Hanji beta bolo. Euro bag कहाँ use करते हैं?
ma'am. When we need to monitor the urine output,
Very good. For example, when do we need to monitor urine output?
uh,
चलो और कोई indication?
ma'am, I
और
don't know.
okay. Vidakshi. Vidakshi, can you tell me one indication of using a Euro bag?
Hello.
Hanji Vidakshi.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, we can see whether there is presence of blood in the urine, the color of the urine.
ऐसे भी देख सकते हैं. तो पेशेंट को बोल दो पास कर दे ट्रांसपेरेंट ट्यूब में, ग्लास ट्यूब में. You can see the color of the urine. Why would you need to attach a Euro bag for?
Sorry, ma'am, I cannot hear you.
Okay. So this Euro bag is used along with another device which is called the Foley's catheter. So basically it is used for collecting urine, and it can be used in an unconscious child who is incontinent and in a sick child to monitor urine. So for the purpose of assessing shock. So urine output is a very good indicator of blood perfusion to the kidneys. So it is a good indicator for shock. So the various parameters we monitor in a sick child include heart rate, respiratory rate, sensorium, and urine output forms an important parameter. It will tell us about renal perfusion. So whenever a patient is in shock, the body will try to preserve blood flow to certain vital organs, and kidney is one of the vital organs. So brain, heart, kidney, these three are the vital organs, and we can effectively measure the renal perfusion by measuring the urine output. So this is where the Euro bag is used. So in an unconscious child who is incontinent, or in a sick child, in a child in shock, in a child with severe dehydration, etc., where you want to see for the urine output, because the child might be going into renal failure. Sorry, one is for renal perfusion in shock, and the other is whenever you suspect renal failure and you have to measure urine output. Another indication would be whenever you need to collect urine, maybe for 24-hour urine collection. In a young child, sometimes it becomes difficult to ask the child to pass urine in a container because of his developmental age in a very young child, maybe an infant. And if you have to collect 24-hour urine, you may need to catheterize and attach a Euro bag. So there are two bags which you will be shown. One is this one, which is called as the a chest bag, intercostal drainage bag, and one is this Euro bag, and you have to differentiate between the two. I will tell you the differences when I come to the intercostal drainage bag. So this Euro bag, it has just one tube which ends here. Immediately upon entry into the bag, the tube ends. This is important because in an intercostal drainage bag, you will see this tube goes down till here. Okay. So this is one difference, and in Euro bag you will have these markings. ये कुछ मार्किंग्स तो बिल्कुल वर्टिकल है और कुछ मार्किंग्स ये स्लांटिंग है. So the vertical markings would be larger, like 100 ml, 200 ml, 300 ml. And when the urine output is less than that, you will have to tilt the bag, and here the markings will be smaller, 25 ml, 50 ml, 75 ml. So this is for measuring the urine output. And to collect the urine in the urobag, you need to use this device, which is called as the Foley's catheter. Indications essentially remain the same. They can be used in unconscious child to collect urine, obviously, because he cannot be told to pass urine, and it can be used in a child in shock to measure renal perfusion and to measure urine output. For that, it can be used for collection of urine to send for analysis in a young child, and where voluntary collection is not possible, and it can be used to monitor urine output in a child in renal failure. So this Foley's catheter has these parts. So this is the part which goes inside. Okay. This balloon is deflated at the time when you insert this inside. This has got a small eye here. It is smooth and closed. This end is closed to avoid injury to the urethra. So you put it into the through the urethral meatus, and when you start getting a flow of urine through this port, then you inflate this balloon by injecting water or air into this port. So you can inject normal saline or water depending upon whatever quantity is mentioned here. So that quantity will be mentioned. You take that much normal saline in a syringe and you push it through here, and this balloon will get inflated inside. You have to make sure that this tip should be inside the bladder before you inflate it. So you will push it through the urethral meatus to completely inside the bladder. Once you start getting a urine flow, you will inflate it, and then you can slightly pull it out till this rests upon the external opening of the urinary bladder. So this will prevent the catheter from coming out itself. And this is again, I'll tell you about this. It has various sizes which are denoted in the unit French. The French scale is used for this. So this is the port through which the urine comes out. This is called as the urine drainage port. This is the end which is put inside the urethral meatus. This you can see is closed. It has an eye here for urine to flow into this, and this balloon, this is when the balloon is deflated. Once it is inside, you will inject fluid here. For example, it mentions 10 ml here, so you will inject 10 ml saline here, and this will inflate the balloon, and the catheter will get fixed inside the bladder. It will not come out itself. Then coming to the urine drainage bag or the intercostal drainage bag, the difference between a urobag and a this intercostal drainage bag is that this tube inside will reach down to this level. In a urobag, it was ending here. So why is it reaching here? Because usually we do an underwater seal for intercostal drainage. So this intercostal drain tube is put not this a separate intercostal drain tube is put into the pleural space, and one end of that tube is attached to this bag to collect any fluid or for getting the air out in case of a pneumothorax. And we do an underwater seal always in case of a pleural drainage, and this part is filled with normal saline or water till this dotted line. So that it has this dotted line here which is filled with normal saline, so that there is no flow of air back into the pleural cavity. And indications for doing a chest drainage would be, intercostal drainage would be, जी कौन बताएगा indications for intercostal drainage? Yes, very good. Pneumothorax. Anything else? Empyema. Empyema, thoracis, pneumothorax. These are the two main indications of doing an intercostal drainage. One is to drain pus and the other is to drain air. In both we use an underwater seal. Okay. So now these are the different fluids which we used in pediatrics. They can be normal saline, Ringer's lactate, dextrose normal saline, and you must know the composition of these usually used fluids. Okay. So Ringer's lactate contains around 130 milliequivalents of sodium per liter. 109 milliequivalents of potassium, 109 of chloride, 4 of potassium, and 3 milliequivalents per liter of calcium. In addition, it also contains lactate. Normal saline only contains sodium and chloride. Sodium is 154 milliequivalents per liter, and chloride is again the same. Either of these two are used for rehydration or for resuscitation in case of shock or a dehydrated child. So then we have dextrose, Ringer's lactate, and the main you should know is plain 5% dextrose, 10% dextrose. Here this is D5W. This only contains dextrose, around 50 grams of dextrose per liter. So that means the 5% would mean 5 grams in 100 ml. So these are the fluids you should know the composition of: Ringer's lactate, normal saline, dextrose 5%, 10%, 25%, and the indications where they are used, right? Then there are several drugs. All of them you have studied under different indications, under different diseases, and you will be shown bottles of these drugs, vials and ampoules of these drugs, and you may be asked about their indications. Like tell us 2 indications, 1 contraindication, side effect. So you should know about the commonly used drugs, especially the emergency drugs. So for example, here I have this picture of mannitol. So it comes in different strengths. This one is 25%. What is the indication of using mannitol? Who is going to tell me? Anji. Yes, to reduce intracranial pressure, cerebral edema, raised ICT, raised ICT. Okay, another indication is to maintain renal perfusion in a patient in oliguric phase of renal failure who is not yet developed anuria. So it was used earlier for that purpose. Now that use is slowly reducing. Main uses in the same only to lower the intracranial pressure. Name another drug which can be used for raised intracranial pressure. Yes, glaucoma also it is used. Good. And another drug which is used for raised ICP. You can just type in the chat box. Raised intracranial pressure में और कौन सी drug use करते हैं? You've heard of hypertonic saline? Yes, glycerol we use करते हैं. Very good. Acetazolamide, hypertonic saline. Okay. So for acutely raised ICP unconscious patient, we use hypertonic saline, and then we can use acetazolamide and glycerol also, which are given orally. These are the parenteral drugs. And the contraindication of mannitol is anuric phase of acute renal failure. Then we have metronidazole. Metronidazole is an antimicrobial which is used in indications for using metronidazole parenterally. हाँ जी बताओ metronidazole कहाँ पे यूज करते हैं? Yes, very good. Anaerobic infections and amoebic infections, amoebic liver abscess. Okay. So in perforation also, whenever we suspect anaerobic infections, and that is why we use it. Abscesses, yes. In abscesses also we suspect anaerobic infections, so we use metronidazole. Then we have ciprofloxacin. So there may be any antibiotic which may be shown to you, and you will be asked its indications. So this is parenteral ciprofloxacin, less commonly used in children, but still it can be used for maybe urinary tract infections or GI infections. And then we have the cefotaxime, which can be used for septicemia and can be used for meningitis. And you should know the doses also in the spectrum which these drugs cover. Ceftriaxone can be used for, yes, ceftriaxone can be used for. Name just 2 indications of using ceftriaxone. You can type in the box. Okay. Okay, so one indication can be enteric fever for a sick child who needs parenteral antibiotics, and another could be pyomeningitis. Ceftriaxone is a good drug for streptococcal infections also, and it can be used in pneumonia. So it has a number of indications, and you should know the dose. Doses around, usually use doses around 100 milligrams per kilogram per day in two divided doses. We can use it for urinary tract infection also. So one of the most commonly used antibiotic. No, it is not used for hospital-acquired sepsis. So usually we use it for community-acquired infections only. Then cloxacillin. What is the main organism which is covered by cloxacillin? हाँ जी टाइप कर दो chat box में. Staphylococcus, yes. So methicillin sensitive staphylococcus, MSSA. For MSSA infections, we use cloxacillin. So those infections can be anywhere, for example, in the lungs, pneumonia, or it can be abscesses anywhere in the body. So whenever the culture sensitivity report shows MSSA, or we are usually for community acquired staph infections, we start with cloxacillin unless and until we suspect resistance to methicillin. We do not add the other. What are the other drugs which can be used for staph infections whenever we expect resistance? For MRSA, what are the drugs we use? No, for MRSA किसी ने लिखो MRSA के लिए we don't use cloxacillin, we use cloxacillin for MSSA. For MRSA we use the drugs, yes, vancomycin, and for vancomycin resistant we use linezolid. So linezolid is sort of a reserve drug. It is used in vancomycin resistant staphylococcus, which is very rare as of now. So we should avoid using linezolid for other infections so that it remains as a reserve drug. So now coming to these benzodiazepines. So we have diazepam. What are the indications of using diazepam? See, you already know all this. There's nothing new I'm teaching you. I'm just showing you the bottles. So bottles which are closed and you have to break the glass top are called as ampoules, and the bottles which are closed by a rubber this thing are called as vials, and these are the two forms in which the bottles may be present. And this is diazepam. तब तक बताओ diazepam कहाँ use करते हैं? Seizures, yes, seizures, status epilepticus और कुछ कोई indication? Sedation के लिए हम usually avoid करते हैं, हम midazolam use करते हैं यहाँ पे. So you should know the dose also. What are the side effects of diazepam? हाँ जी. What are the side effects of diazepam? Respiratory depression, CNS depression, and hypotension also. It can cause hypotension also. The most common side effect is respiratory depression. What are the routes of administration of diazepam and what is the dose? These are the reasons why it may be used. I don't know how to. I wanted to turn on the camera, but I'm not able to turn it on. Doesn't show go to meeting. Just 1 second, I'm trying to turn on my camera because there are a number of things I want to show you. Go to webinar. Okay, so after diazepam we have midazolam. वो again हाँ, routes of administration of diazepam बता रहे थे तुम लोग. What are the routes of administration of diazepam? हाँ जी, किसी ने नहीं आंसर टाइप करा. Rectal. Okay, सबसे पहले IV. It can be given orally also, and it can be given per rectally also. IV per rectal, yes. So the advantages of per rectal and oral would be respiratory depression would be less. For IV, respiratory depression is more, and you have to give it really slowly. And then phenytoin. What are the indications of phenytoin? What are the indications of phenytoin? These are status epilepticus and it is given as an infusion. The loading dose is 20 milligrams per kilogram and should not be given at a rate faster than 1 mg per kg. Then what are its contraindications? What are its complications? Side effect is mainly it causes hypotension. So you must give it at a slower rate. And then it has there is another drug which is called as fosphenytoin, which is a precursor of phenytoin, which usually does not have the side effect of phenytoin. And after entering the body, it's converted in 15 minutes, converted into phenytoin. So that can be administered at a faster pace. So since the dose is 20 mg per kg and the maximum rate of administration is 1 mg per kg per 20 minutes, so usually the loading dose is administered over 20 minutes. So side effect of phenytoin is again arrhythmias. It is also a anti-arrhythmic drug, and all anti-arrhythmic drugs are pro-arrhythmic also. So one side effect is arrhythmias. So phenytoin toxicity can lead to, they can be chronic toxicity and acute. Acutely it can cause hypotension and arrhythmias, and chronic toxicity can lead to gum hyperplasia, and they can be nystagmus, ataxia, and the maintenance dose is between 5 and 10 milligrams per kilogram per day. And whenever these side effects are there, we have to change the drug. Phenytoin can also cause deficiency of folic acid and calcium, vitamin D. We usually supplement calcium, vitamin D, and folic acid with phenytoin and phenobarbital. So this is another drug which is an anti-epileptic, preferred in neonates, usually not preferred in older children because it causes some this thing CNS depression, and assessing the sensorium might become a problem if it is given to older children. The dose is the same, loading dose of 20 mg per kg per day, and its side effect is respiratory depression. So it again has to be administered slowly because suddenly the child might stop breathing. It may cause respiratory depression. So it is preferred anti-epileptic in newborns. Then we have soda bicarb. It comes in various strengths, and the indications would be, okay, where is soda bicarb used? Hanji, yeah, acidosis. Anywhere else? जी और कहाँ यूज होता है? ओके, सिर्फ एक ही आंसर है रीनल एसिडोसिस, मेटाबॉलिक एसिडोसिस, डायबिटिक कीटोएसिडोसिस, methanol poisoning, hypokalemia, hyperkalemia, reflux due to renal acidosis. Thank you, sir. So actually I was trying to connect the video नहीं हो रहा
नहीं बैठे हो, मैं तो देखने आ रहा है दिख रहे हैं
नहीं, वो नहीं तो वीडियो नहीं हो रहा ना, तो ये तो मैंने
मतलब आप नहीं दिख रहे हो,
मैंने तो पीपीटी बनाई हुई है, तो पीपीटी तो दिखा दी मैंने
ये सब दिख
इन
रहे
सब की इमेजेस दिखाई नहीं अभी दिख रहे, इन सब की तो मैंने इमेजेस लगाई हुई है, मुझे तो वीडियो पता नहीं चले ना चले, तो अब मैं वीडियो करने की कोशिश कर रही हूँ बट वो हो नहीं रहा।
हाँ वीडियो भी तो आ जाता है साइड में, वही देखने आता है कैसे कर रहे हैं क्लास।
नहीं मैंने तो पीपीटी से तो कर दी है।
दूसरी इसकी पंकज की है,
उनकी तो
पंकज की तो उतनी वीडियो की जरूरत नहीं,
उनकी तो हो चुकी है,
हो गई क्लास नहीं हुई,
डॉक्टर पंकज की तो हो चुकी फर्स्ट होती
नहीं रीशेड्यूल की है।
अच्छा फिर नहीं मुझे पता,
करनी है अभी, करनी है अभी।
ओके जस्ट 1 सेकंड
आप कर लो
ओके सर।
मैं तो वही देखने आया था, ये दिख रहा है
यहाँ पे नहीं दिख रहा, ये मैं कर रही हूँ वेब कैम ऑन ना,
हाँ।
तो ये बोल रहा है कि गो टू ओपन सिस्टम प्रेफरेंसेस,
तो उनको फोन करके पूछना चाहिए था।
नहीं वो मेरे कंप्यूटर पे बोलेंगे कि आपको आना चाहिए, अब मैं सिस्टम प्रेफरेंसेस ओपन करती हूँ तो ये यहाँ पे दिखाते ही नहीं है।
आईटी वाले
फोन पे ट्राई करिए, hyperkalemia. Yes, hyperkalemia is not an indication. Hyperkalemia is 1 second. So we were at soda bicarb. Soda bicarb is given metabolic acidosis occur in renal tubular acidosis or inborn errors of metabolism. And when the pH is very low, we usually use it if the pH is less than 7.1. Some books say if it is less than 7. And it can also be given in hyperkalemia. Okay, so there's severe hyperkalemia. Then in renal failure. Then epinephrine, Hanji, where is it used? This is what an ampule looks like. This is a glass bottle which needs to be broken before use. So this is an ampule. Okay, Google Meet is better. Okay, I'll create a meeting on Google Meet. Okay, so epinephrine is used in. It is used for anaphylaxis. What is the route of administration in anaphylaxis? So you have to know the routes of administrations also for various indications. Anaphylaxis में कैसे use करते हैं? No, preferably if you have an IV access, you use it intravenously. But if that is not available, then you use it intramuscularly. So it can be used in cold shock also as an infusion, and basically it is used for resuscitation if the heart rate is less than 60 despite adequate ventilation and adequate CPR. So it is used for cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Then ranitidine, H2 receptor blocker, which is used for acute gastritis or peptic ulcers or stress ulcers in a sick child. So lignocaine is used for local anesthesia. But one side effect of lignocaine is cardiac arrhythmias. So you have to make sure that you have not punctured a blood vessel and it is infiltrated locally into the tissues. You must know what is the maximum concentration of lignocaine which is given to any patient. It is around 8 mg per kg, and exceeding that can lead to systemic absorption and cardiac effects. Then it can also be used. Okay. So this is calcium gluconate. It is used for hypocalcemia, which may lead to seizures or tetany. And another indication for calcium gluconate, which is not related to its low calcium levels. Yes, very good. Hyperkalemia. So in hyperkalemia, it is used for stabilizing the membrane, and so that arrhythmias are avoided. So calcium gluconate comes usually under in 10% strength, and dose we uses 2 mg per kg, 2 ml per kg in 1-in-1 dilution with distilled water, and we administer it very slowly. Its side effect is bradycardia, and if it is administered rapidly, it can even cause cardiac arrest. Then this is furosemide, commonly called as Lasix. It is used to increase urine output, as in, and where is Lasix used? In cardiogenic pulmonary edema, in cardiac failure. Okay, so then we come to ORS. ORS is very important. You have to know the composition. The sodium chloride, this is the WHO ORS. Sodium chloride is 3.5 grams, potassium chloride is 1.5 grams. Then it has trisodium citrate, 2.9 grams, and glucose, 20 grams. What is the total osmolarity? Is around 245 milliosmoles. 75 millimoles per liter of sodium, 65 of chloride, glucose 75, potassium 20, and citrate 10. So you learn the composition. The triclofos is used for sedation, and dose is around 50 to 75 milligrams per kilogram, given orally for procedural sedation. For example, you want to do an EEG, or you want to do an ECG in a young child, or you want to do an echocardiography. So this is used for procedural sedation, given orally. And no, thank you. I will just create a Google meeting and I will put the link on this only. So just 1 second. So I sent you a link. Okay, you want me to send to your CR. Actually, 1 second, I will. So I have sent the link to your CR also. Okay. You just wait for 5 minutes for everybody to join. So I am logging off GoToWebinar and closing that meeting because I think there would be internet issues if I have both of them on. So I'll stop sharing now. And end the webinar.